Ladies and gentlemen, don't be fooled by his silence. He's not over you. He's haunted by you. That quiet you hear isn't peace, it's punishment. It's the sound of a man replaying every moment he thought he could replace you, only to realize he can't. He's not texting because he's healed. He's not calling because he's scared. Scared that if he hears your voice, every wall he built will crumble. Silence isn't strength, it's regret disguised as pride. And while he's out there pretending he's fine, you're the one echoing in every corner of his mind. And he's not over you, he's just silent. And silence, my friend, can be one of the loudest confessions a person ever makes. You see, when someone goes quiet after losing you, it's not always peace they've found. It's the chaos they're learning to hide. It's the storm they're trying to control behind a calm face. Because sometimes when a man realizes what he's lost, he doesn't announce it to the world. He buries it. He masks it. He pretends it doesn't exist. But deep down, that silence, it's screaming. And he's not texting you, not because he doesn't care, but because he knows he doesn't have the right words that can undo the damage he caused. He's not calling, not because he's moved on, but because hearing your voice would remind him of the warmth he once took for granted. He's avoiding your social media, not because he's indifferent, but because every post of yours tells him a story that doesn't include him anymore, and that reality burns. And don't confuse silence with closure. Don't mistake his absence for indifference. People who truly don't care have no reason to restrain themselves. They move on freely, effortlessly, without second thoughts. But the ones who do care, the ones who still feel, they battle an invisible war. They rehearse texts they never send. They scroll through your pictures and stop on the ones that remind to him of better times. They convince themselves that silence makes them stronger, but all it really does is amplify the ache they're trying to bury. And he's not over you. He's just too proud to admit that he still thinks of you when he's lying awake at night. Too ashamed to say that the memories you created still echo through his mind when he's surrounded by noise. Too afraid to confess that every time he meets someone new, he compares them to the way you made him feel. And you see, when someone's truly over you, they don't need to prove it. They don't need to go silent. They don't need to hide. They're at peace. But his silence, it's not peace, it's punishment. It's the price of realizing too late what you were worth. It's the consequence of discovering that not everyone you lose can be replaced. And deep down, he knows it. And there are moments when he thinks about reaching out. He picks up his phone, types your name, even writes a message, but then he stops. He stops because he doesn't know what version of you he'll find on the other side. He doesn't know if you'll respond with warmth, with indifference, or with silence of your own. And that uncertainty scares him more than being ignored. So he stays quiet, not because he's done, but because he's terrified that he no longer matters. And don't for a second think that your absence goes unnoticed. People remember the energy you gave them. They remember the way you made them feel, seen, heard, alive. He remembers it too. He might pretend otherwise, might act unbothered, might even post things that suggest he's thriving. But behind that performance lies truth. The truth that he can't scroll past your name without feeling that familiar tug in his chest. The truth that every time he sees something that reminds him of you, he has to look away a little faster than before. And it's easier for him to stay silent than to face what he lost. It's easier to act like you were just another chapter than to admit that you were the story that changed him. Because admitting that means admitting regret. It means admitting weakness. And for someone who once held you but didn't know how to keep you, that's a hard truth to face. And so he hides behind silence. But silence doesn't heal what's unresolved. It just buries it deeper. And every now and then, that silence cracks. Maybe he hears your favorite song. Maybe he passes a place you both used to go. Maybe someone says your name. And in that moment, his heart betrays him. It reminds him that you still live there quietly, powerfully, endlessly. And what you must understand is this: your worth was never determined by his recognition of it. His silence is not a reflection of your value. It's a mirror of his confusion, his regret, his fear. You showed him a kind of love that made him feel safe and seen. But when someone doesn't know how to receive that kind of love, they run from it. And when they realize they can't find it again, they go quiet. not because they've found peace, but because they can't face the noise of their own regret. And you've probably felt that silence yourself. You've stared at your phone, waiting for a message that never came. You've replayed moments in your mind, trying to find the exact second things started to fade. You've wondered if he ever thinks about you, if he ever feels the same emptiness you do. And the truth is he does. He just won't let you see it, because if he shows you, he admits that he still cares. And that would mean lowering a guard he's built to protect his ego. But the silence that he thinks is protecting him is the same silence that's keeping him trapped. Because closure doesn't come from pretending it doesn't hurt. It comes from facing what you lost, feeling it fully, and growing from it. And while you're out here learning, healing, rebuilding, he's stuck in a loop of what ifs and could have beens. And there will be nights when he wishes he could go back, even for a minute, not to fix things, but just to feel that sense of belonging again. He'll scroll through your messages, not to reply, but to remember who he was when he had you. And he'll realize that silence doesn't erase the past. It just leaves it unfinished. But you, don't chase the silence. Don't break your own peace trying to interpret his. Let him sit with his choices. Let him feel the weight of your absence, because silence, when used wisely, isn't a weapon, it's wisdom. It's your way of saying, I don't need to prove my worth by begging for acknowledgement. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows that what's meant for them won't require chasing. And he may not say it out loud, but deep down, he knows. He knows that no one else has looked at him the way you did. No one else has understood him without words. No one else has matched his energy the way you did, effortlessly. And that realization, it doesn't fade, it lingers, it stays. And so when you catch yourself missing him, remember, he's missing you too. He's just too silent to admit it, too afraid to face the mirror that reflects his mistakes. But don't confuse that silence for strength. It's fear disguised as pride. Because real strength isn't in avoiding emotion, it's in owning it. And then one day, he'll realize that silence cost him more than words ever could, that by trying to protect his ego, he lost the one person who truly saw him. He'll replay the moments, the laughter, the softness in your voice, and realize that no silence could ever drown out what he still feels. And he's not over you, he's just silent. And that silence, it's not peace, it's the sound of someone who finally understands the value of what they let go, but no longer has the courage to say it. And even though you may never hear the words, the truth lives in the space between what's said and what's not. That silence carries the weight of everything he couldn't bring himself to say. The apologies he rehearsed but never delivered, the confessions he swallowed, the moments he wanted to reach for you but convinced himself it was too late. Because silence isn't always strength. Sometimes it's surrender. It's the quiet aftermath of realizing that the person who once made your world brighter is now learning to shine without you. And he scrolls through his days trying to convince himself he's moved on. He fills the silence with distractions, work, friends, meaningless conversations, temporary connections. But when the noise fades, when the night grows still, your presence creeps back into his thoughts. It's in the way he remembers your laugh when something unexpectedly reminds him of you. It's in the way he catches himself smiling at a memory he thought he'd forgotten. It's in the ache that surfaces when he realizes he can't recreate the kind of connection he once took for granted. And he's not over you, he's haunted by what he lost. He doesn't talk about it, because to talk about it would make it real. So he pretends. He acts as though he's fine, as though the silence is peace, when in reality it's just a fragile mask holding back a flood of unspoken emotion. He's caught between the pride that keeps him quiet and the longing that won't let him rest. And though he won't say it, that tension is slowly breaking him down. And when someone truly moves on, they carry no bitterness, no need to prove, no urge to compare. But when someone's pretending, it shows in the way they overcompensate, the way they show the world they're doing great, as if to convince themselves of it. It shows in the way they stay guarded, not because they don't care anymore, but because they're terrified of being that vulnerable again. Because once you've been seen deeply by someone, surface level no longer satisfies. And, and deep down, he knows that no one else has reached that depth with him. He may meet people who are attractive, interesting, even kind. But the bond you built wasn't built overnight. It was formed in the little things, the way you understood his silences, the way you noticed his shifts in energy, the way you could sense his walls before he even spoke. You didn't love his potential. You loved the reality of who he was, flaws and all. And that kind of love, it doesn't just disappear. It lingers like a shadow, reminding him that he was once truly seen. And he'll try to fill the void, but what he's really chasing is a feeling he can't replicate. He's chasing the safety of being fully understood, the warmth of being accepted without judgment, the peace of knowing that someone genuinely cared. But you can't replace a connection that came from authenticity. You can't substitute real for almost. And while he might be surrounded by people, there will still be moments when he feels completely alone, because emotional solitude is the cost of losing someone who met you soul to soul. And you, on the other hand, are learning to navigate the same silence differently. You're using it to grow, to heal, to rediscover who you are outside of that story. While he uses silence to hide, you're using it to evolve. You're learning that the absence of his words isn't the absence of love. It's the presence of space for your own transformation. Because love isn't meant to be begged for. It's meant to be reciprocated. And when it's not, silence becomes your superpower. And the person you once poured into is now learning what it feels like to be empty. He's realizing that real love isn't loud. It's consistent. It's in the effort, the showing up, the small things that go unnoticed until they're gone. And now that they're gone, he's starting to understand what you brought into his life. The peace, the understanding, the kind of loyalty that can't be manufactured. But sometimes people need to lose peace to recognize its value. Sometimes they need to feel the emptiness to appreciate the fullness they once had. And he tells himself that silence makes him mysterious, in control, detached. But what he doesn't realize is that silence also keeps him stuck in the same emotional place where he lost you. Because growth doesn't happen in avoidance, it happens in accountability. And silence without reflection is just avoidance wearing a mask. So while he's quiet, he's not healing, he's stalling. He's caught between wanting to move forward and being pulled backward by the weight of unfinished emotions. And you might think he's forgotten you because he doesn't show signs of missing you. But there's a difference between forgetting and trying to suppress. Suppression isn't closure, it's delay. Every emotion he avoids now will resurface later, sharper, louder, and harder to escape. Because love like that doesn't vanish. It transforms into memories, regrets, and lessons that follow you until you face them. And you became his mirror, the person who reflected back the truth of who he was. You saw the good, the potential, and the parts he tried to hide. And that kind of reflection is rare. It's why he can't let go, even if he pretends to. Because once someone sees you that deeply, it's almost impossible to go back to being unseen. You left an imprint not just on his heart, but on his sense of self. And though he's silent, the universe has a way of speaking through the quiet. Life will keep placing reminders in his path until he faces the emotions he's been avoiding. The song that plays at the wrong time. The quote that hits too close to home, the stranger who says something that sounds like your voice, the way he catches himself comparing someone's smile to yours, the silence he once used as an escape becomes the very thing that confronts him with everything he's been running from. And meanwhile, you are outgrowing the version of yourself that needed his validation. You're learning that you don't need his words to confirm your worth, because sometimes the closure we crave from others is really an invitation to give it to ourselves. You're realizing that the silence you once found, eared, is now your sanctuary, a space where you can hear your own thoughts clearly, feel your own strength fully, and see your own beauty unapologetically. And in time, that silence becomes your statement. It's not revenge, it's revelation. It's the quiet power of someone who has learned that love doesn't need to be chased to be real. Because when you stand in your worth, the world adjusts. People either rise to meet you or they fall away. And the ones who fall away, they feel it. He feels it. Every moment he tries to distract himself is a reminder that not everyone is replaceable. And he'll see you one day, whether in person or through a screen, and realize that you've become everything he couldn't appreciate when he had the chance. He'll see the peace in your eyes, the confidence in your stride, the glow that comes from self-love. And that realization will cut deeper than any words you could have said, because your silence now speaks volumes. It says, I've moved forward, not because I stopped caring, but because I finally started caring for myself. And in that moment, he'll understand what silence truly means. Not the silence of pride, but the silence of acceptance. The silence that comes when you realize the chapter is over, but the lessons remain. The silence that says, you had your chance. And though he'll never say it out loud, he'll wish he had handled things differently. But by then, you won't need to hear it. Because your heart will already know. It will know that his silence was never a reflection of your worth. It was a reflection of his struggle. And that knowledge will give you peace. Because while he used silence to hide, you used it to rise. And that's the difference. And he's not over you, he's just silent. But silence doesn't mean strength. It's the sound of realization, of regret, of remembering what he can't return to. And though he may never say it, that silence is filled with one truth that time will never erase. You were the one who got away, and he knows it every time the world gets quiet. And as the days go by, that silence begins to change shape. What started as an act of pride starts to feel like a prison. He tells himself he's better off not reaching out, but every unspoken word builds a wall between who he is now and who he was when he had you. The more time passes, the more he realizes that silence doesn't erase memories. It amplifies them. It makes the moments louder in his mind, clearer, sharper, more real. He starts to remember the way you used to listen without judgment, the way you made even the simplest conversations feel meaningful, and he starts to wonder if he'll ever find that again. And he keeps replaying the same thoughts, trying to convince himself that what he's feeling is temporary. But deep down, he knows it isn't. Because when you've experienced a connection that touches your soul, it doesn't fade with distance or time. It lingers, quietly reminding you of what it felt like to be understood, to be seen. That silence he hides behind becomes a mirror, reflecting every moment he took for granted. And in that reflection, he starts to see the truth that losing you wasn't just losing a person, it was losing a part of himself that only existed when you were there. And you might think he's forgotten, that his lack of words means he's moved on. But people don't forget the ones who made them better, even if they failed to show up for them. They carry those memories in the small corners of their mind, tucked behind conversations and laughter with other people. He might smile, he might laugh, but there's always that quiet flicker behind his eyes when something reminds him of you. He's learned how to hide it well, but that doesn't mean it's gone. It just means he's trying to survive it. And he doesn't talk about it to anyone, because how do you explain missing something you pushed away? How do you admit that the silence you created has now become unbearable? Pride keeps him from speaking, but regret keeps him from resting. It's a cruel balance, one that eats away slowly, quietly, invisibly. And though he may look composed on the outside, there's a storm inside him that never fully settles. And he starts to notice it in small ways. The songs he skips because they remind him of you. The places he avoids because being there feels like standing in the past. The moments he hesitates to share with others because they remind him of how easily he once shared everything with you. He might try to build a new story, but every new chapter feels incomplete because he's still holding on to the last one he never finished. And then while he's stuck in that silence, you're learning to live again. You've stopped waiting for his words, stopped checking for signs. You've learned that closure doesn't always come from the person who hurt you. It comes from realizing that you no longer need them to heal. You're rediscovering your strength in the quiet moments, finding peace not in what's said, but in what's felt. Because growth isn't loud, it's often quiet. It's the soft determination that rises within you when you choose yourself over waiting for someone else. And you start to notice that your silence carries a different energy. It's not the silence of confusion or hurt anymore, it's the silence of power, the kind of silence that says, I've learned, I've let go, I'm free. And the more you step into that strength, the more the energy shifts. Because while he's using silence to avoid emotion, you're using it to build inner peace. You're learning to turn the space he left behind into something beautiful. And he might think his silence has the last word, but what he doesn't realize is that silence can speak in more ways than one. When he doesn't call, the silence tells him what he lost. When he doesn't text, the silence reminds him of the conversations that used to make his day. When he stays away, the silence becomes a weight, pressing down on him, forcing him to feel everything he's tried to escape. Silence, for him, becomes a haunting. For you, it becomes healing. And there's something powerful about walking away without making noise. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to prove that you've moved on. Your energy does that for you. Every time you choose peace over reaction, every time you smile without needing attention, every time you continue to grow despite his absence, you're showing that silence doesn't mean weakness. It means strength. It means you've learned that not everyone deserves access to your voice. And he will come to realize that silence has two sides. One brings peace, the other brings pain. The same silence that gave you clarity will give him confusion. The same stillness that healed you will haunt him. Because the truth is, people don't forget the ones who loved them when they weren't ready to love themselves. They might act like they've moved on, but their heart remembers who held it gently. And he'll start to feel that pull again, the urge to reach out, the desire to say something, anything, just to break the silence. But time has a cruel way of humbling people. By the time he finds the courage, the moment may have already passed. You'll no longer be waiting. You'll no longer need the words he's finally ready to say, because silence, in its own poetic way, teaches timing. It teaches that you can't always come back to something you walked away from, expecting it to stay the same. And he'll try to fill that silence with new experiences, new faces, new distractions. But no matter how much he fills his life with noise, there will always be quiet moments, the drive home at night, the walk alone, the early mornings, where the memory of you slips through the cracks. And it's in those moments that he'll understand the true cost of silence, that by choosing not to speak, not to show up, not to fight for what mattered, he allowed something replaceable to fade. And yet, even with all the regret, he won't always know how to fix it, because silence can build walls that are harder to tear down than words ever could. The longer he stays quiet, the further he drifts. The distance becomes more than physical. It becomes emotional, spiritual, irreversible. And while he's lost in that distance, you're becoming more whole, more grounded, more in tune with yourself. And you're no longer defined by what he didn't say. You're defined by how you responded, with grace, with strength, with growth. Because silence doesn't destroy those who know how to use it. It destroys those who hide behind it. You've learned to sit in it, to understand it, to use it as fuel. You've learned that peace doesn't come from someone else finally speaking. It comes from realizing you no longer need them to. And he feels that. Every time your name comes up, every time he sees a glimpse of your happiness, he feels the echo of what he let go. He might not show it, but it's there. The quiet recognition that the silence he thought would give him power actually left him powerless, because silence doesn't erase love. It only reveals who was strong enough to survive without it. And that's the truth that lingers. The silence between you isn't empty. It's full of memories, lessons, realizations. It holds the weight of everything unsaid, everything undone, everything he wishes he could take back. And while he's learning to live with that weight, you've learned to release yours. You've turned what was once painful into power, what was once confusion into clarity. And because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all. Let silence do the talking. Let it speak of your strength, your boundaries, your growth. Let it show that while he used it to hide, you used it to heal. And even though he may never admit it, that silence, it will be the loudest reminder of all, the reminder that you were the one who found peace while he was still searching for it. And then slowly, that silence begins to turn into a mirror he can't escape from. Every time he sits in that quiet, he's forced to face the truth he's been running from, that no matter how far he goes, how many new people he meets, how many nights he distracts himself with noise, The absence of you doesn't fade. It becomes part of his rhythm, part of his days, part of his nights. He's not used to the world being this quiet, not used to the echo of his own thoughts haunting him, the way your voice once filled the silence with laughter, comfort, and understanding. And at first he told himself it was just nostalgia, just memories, that in time you'd fade like everyone else has. But as weeks turn into months, he realizes that this feels different. You weren't just another person passing through his story. You were a chapter he never learned how to close. He can pretend all he wants, but deep down, that silence he's been hiding behind has become unbearable. Because silence is only peaceful when you have nothing left to say, when your heart is still full of unsaid words. Silence becomes a weight too heavy to carry. And he thinks about the way you used to look at him when he spoke, how you had this way of making him feel heard, even when he couldn't find the right words. He remembers how you could sense his moods before he said a thing, how you always met his darkness with calm instead of judgment. And that memory lingers no matter how much he tries to push it away, because it wasn't just what you gave, it was how you gave it. You showed up with a level of care he didn't think existed, a softness that made him feel safe, and he didn't know what to do with that kind of love. And so he distanced himself. He told himself he needed space, that he wasn't ready, that he was better off alone. But what he really needed was understanding that not everyone who gets close is trying to hurt him. You tried to show him that, but fear spoke louder than love. And now in the silence he thought would protect him, fear has turned into loneliness. Because when you lose someone who loved you through your walls, you're left with nothing but those walls for company. And he'll look back one day and realize that silence can be the most painful form of communication. Because silence leaves too much to the imagination. It lets doubt grow. It lets fear win. It creates space where love used to live. And that's what he's feeling now. The silence he chose has turned into the distance he can't close. He'll see things that remind him of you. A cafe, a song, a scent. And for a second, he'll feel that familiar pull in his chest, that ache of remembering what used to be effortless. But the hardest part won't be the memory. It'll be knowing that he can't go back. And meanwhile, you've learned something he hasn't yet. You've learned that silence doesn't always mean loss. Sometimes it means transformation. You've turned that quiet into a classroom for your soul. You've learned how to listen to your own needs, to your intuition, to your peace. You've learned that your love is powerful, but it doesn't have to be poured into someone who can't hold it. You've discovered that your energy is sacred and not everyone deserves access to it. And that realization has changed you in ways silence never could have if you hadn't walked through it. And you've grown into the version of yourself that no longer chases clarity from others. You've found it within. You no longer wait for words that may never come because you've learned that your healing doesn't depend on someone else's apology. You've stopped replaying the story trying to find where you went wrong because deep down, you know you didn't. You gave your best. You loved deeply. You showed up fully. And when someone walks away, from that, their silence isn't a reflection of your worth, it's a reflection of their readiness. And he'll try to move forward, but every step he takes will feel unfamiliar without you there. He'll meet people who make him laugh, who keep him company, but none of them will bring the same sense of calm you did. Because peace doesn't just come from presence, it comes from connection. And genuine connection can't be replaced by convenience. You can find people who fill time, but not everyone can fill your soul. And though he might not say it, he'll feel it. Every single time he tries to recreate what came naturally with you, he'll realize it's not something that can be forced. It's something that's either there or it's not. And that realization will sit heavy in his heart because he'll understand that silence doesn't erase love, it preserves it. Every unspoken word, every unshared emotion, every moment he let pass by without reaching out, they all become reminders of what fear cost him. And the longer he stays quiet, the louder those reminders become. Silence, once his shield, will start to echo with every missed opportunity, every moment he could have chosen courage, but didn't. And you might wonder if he ever truly cared, if the silence means you never mattered. But the truth is, people show love in different ways, and sometimes their silence isn't a lack of emotion, it's an overload of it. Some people go quiet not because they don't feel, but because they feel too much and don't know how to express it. They get lost in their own confusion, trapped between what their heart wants and what their fear allows. And that's exactly where he is, caught in the gap between love and pride, regret and hope, silence and longing. But you've stepped out of that gap. You've walked into a new space where silence no longer suffocates, it strengthens. You've realized that the quiet you once feared now protects you from chaos, that the space you once filled with overthinking can now be filled with peace, that the love you once gave so freely can now be redirected back to yourself, because you deserve to be met, not managed. You deserve words, effort, consistency, not silence that leaves you guessing. And there will come a day when he'll break the silence, not because he suddenly found courage, but because the weight of it becomes too heavy to carry alone. He'll reach out in some small way, maybe just to see if the door is still open. But by then, you'll be standing in a different place. You'll have outgrown the version of yourself that needed answers. You'll be living proof that silence doesn't destroy the strong, it reveals them. And he'll notice it in your energy, the peace, the self-assurance, the quiet confidence of someone who no longer seeks validation from anyone's words. And that will unsettle him more than any conversation ever could. Because the silence he once thought gave him control will become the silence that reminds him he lost it. You won't need to say a thing. Your growth will speak for you. And in that realization, he'll finally understand what silence really meant. It wasn't that you didn't care, it was that you chose to let go with grace. You chose peace over chaos, self-respect over confusion, faith over fear. You chose to trust that what's meant for you won't require chasing, begging, or breaking your own boundaries. And that choice, your decision to step back, to stay silent, to focus on your own healing, is the very thing that sets you free while he remains bound. Because silence doesn't just end a story, it rewrites it. It takes power from those who use it to avoid and gives it to those who use it to evolve. And though he may never say the words, his heart will always know. Every time he hears your name, every time he feels that familiar ache when he thinks of what could have been, he'll remember that silence didn't mean you stopped caring. It meant you cared enough to walk away when the love was no longer being returned. And in that understanding, his silence will no longer be his armor, it will be his consequence.